All right, really excited to be talking with Gavin Schall, the co-host of Locked On Knicks here. The morning after the Knicks sweep the Cleveland Cavaliers, they're making it to the NBA Finals, first time since 1999. Gavin, you and XJ do an awesome job covering this Knicks run over at Locked On Knicks, and you guys do a great job of covering the strategy, how they got here, all that kind of stuff. But before we get to any of that boring X's and O's stuff, I want to start with the emotional component of all of this because, like I just said, first NBA Finals appearance since 1999. And the Knicks do it in a way that feels dominant. It feels like a crescendo of sorts, right? 11 straight playoff wins now. They're winning these games by an average margin of more than 22, 23 points. Just an absolute dominant run through the Eastern Conference, unlike anything we've seen, maybe even since the Celtics. You just look at the numbers. This is a better run than what the Celtics had in 2024. Let's go to the feelings part of this, Gavin. What's it feel like right now for Knicks fans?
I'm going to get there. I need to give you one number before we get to feelings. Tim Bontemps had the stat last night. Their margin of victory over these 11 games is not just the most in playoff history. It's the most over any 11-game stretch in NBA history. Like that is the number that blew my mind. I mean, it doesn't, in some ways it makes sense because I guess you just play an opponent and you find a weakness and you break them and then there's no alternative. Like you don't have to pivot, you don't have to play another team. But that is the one that I was like, all right, that's just crazy. As far as the emotion, me and XJ talked about this last night. It was this strange, I think maybe because it's been such an easy path for them, like it felt very surreal. And you're sitting there and you're like, I kind of feel like not. I almost felt more when they won the NBA Cup. Like, what's going on with that? And then you see Clyde up there, who maybe national NBA fans don't know this, but he's a long time with Mike Breen, Knicks analyst, and like someone I went to his basketball camps growing up. That's someone I've sort of known, has felt like a family member, even though I don't think he'd know my name since I was like 7 years old. And I was like, all right, that's cool. You see Patrick Ewing, who obviously notoriously has gotten there, but had a lot of heartbreak up there. You see Jalen and the guys he's been like his boys since college. Like that has to be so surreal on his end. But weirdly enough, the part that got me was Josh Hart shouting out Landry Shamet and the crowd in Rocket Arena getting dramatically louder for that than they had at any other moment. And this guy who struggled to make the roster 2 of the last 3 years, I think the last 2 years, has separated his shoulder and 1 year got dropped. And this year they held on to him, but like brutal journey. And for him to go through that, and then what he finished the series 12 of 13, 13 of 14 from three, I think 105% effective field goal percent. I'm still throwing stats in there, but for whatever reason, like the camera cutting to him and the crowd losing their mind, like that is when I like almost started tearing up. I was like, all right, this is pretty cool. And I know you know that as a Heat guy, like I'm sure you probably had similar feelings. I guess about Max Strus and Gabe Vincent like a couple years ago. Like it's these like tertiary guys, these fringe players that had to like scrap and claw to even make the roster. And in some ways, obviously not for someone like Karl-Anthony Towns, who's the number 1 pick, but that's the story to some extent for a lot of guys on this Knicks team, like underdogs who came together, figured it out. And it's cool to see the heights they've reached collectively.
I do want to talk about how this group came together, but the Shamet point is such a good one. This guy is a Malcolm Brogdon retirement away from not being on the Knicks, right? I mean, it was a very strange way for him to land back with this team. And the fact that, you kind of always need a guy like a Shamet to pull off a run to the NBA Finals, right? You need your stars to do stars things, but you also need the role players to step up. And Shamet, I mean, just not missing threes for 2 weeks is one hell of a way to step up. Like that is awesome.
Contrast him with Sam Merrill. Like if we talked about this last night, but you flip those two guys. Is this a 6 or 7 game series? Like literally just flipping like nominally the 8th guy, pure shooter on both teams, but it's such a difference. Like I think Cleveland wins game 1 and 2 if you flip them.
Well, the Knicks coming back the way that they did to beat the Cavs in game 1. Right, the Cavs are up. What was it? 15 points. It was a 15-0 run.
22 points with
22
7
points.
and a half minutes left.
Yeah, and then the Knicks they storm back at Madison Square Garden. Watching that game, MSG is dead quiet.
Yeah,
and the Knicks storm back in the 4th quarter, and that place erupts. And I thought the Knicks did 80% of the job to win that game, and then it felt like the crowd pushed them over the hump for that next 20% to actually go get that win in game one. And I said after game one, I'm like, I think that's the series.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the Cavs can beat the Knicks 5 times. I think they had them there at game one. You had a chance to come off that game 7 that they came off of and take game one in Madison Square Garden and really set the tone for this series. And yet this Cavaliers team, which I'm going to get to in a different segment, but it always kind of felt wobbly. It always felt pretty precarious with this group. That one little shove could push this team over the edge in a bad way. And that's sort of the shove that it felt like Madison Square Garden collectively got behind them and was like, you're off the mountain. This is our mountaintop. And it just feels like Knicks fans have not stopped celebrating since, like, they have not been quiet since that fourth quarter run in game one. I know Knicks in 4 is like the rallying cry right now. Congratulations, you guys got it. The fact that you've got Patrick Ewing in the crowd making that trip to Cleveland, Ben Stiller, Timothy Chalamet, like all these guys, for a big city team that has fans all over the world, for that contingent to have that traveling party kind of go with them to Cleveland, I don't know. There's something about this wait since 1999 that feels especially deserving. I don't know if it's even deserving, but like the old Knicks being part of this, that's like something we see in college football, not necessarily in the NBA, right? It's not like Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and Ray Allen were showing up for the Celtics in 2024. It's not like, you know what I mean? That's a pretty cool thing, is basically what I'm saying.
No, it's amazing the culture they built. And look, we can all be critical of James Dolan for having built a surveillance state in MSG. That's obviously not great. One thing he's done well, which maybe is minor compared to that, is kept the alumni around, right? Like it's this fascinating thing of that the team has obviously for the last 27 years mostly sucked, and that's the benefit of being like, I guess, like a quote unquote, if I can say this without people throwing up in their mouths, like legacy franchise is like you can go back. Like Clyde is part of their history for over 60 years at this point, and he was there as like arguably the best player in team history, and he's been there since, and he's been an analyst for this team for solid 3 decades now. And Ewing, like the second he lost his job at Georgetown, like they brought him right back into the fold. Allen Houston has had like a prominent position in this organization for years and years and years. Stephon Marbury is he was my favorite. He was another guy's basketball camps I went to growing up, and one of my favorite players growing up. And he obviously
Did you have a pair of Starburys?
I actually never owned them, but I love them from afar. I was always like, oh man, I should go down by. They were like $15. I had no excuse.
I know. Right?
But yeah, I should have owned them. But point being, like he's like Dolan and maybe Charles Oakley would disagree with this, but for the most part, has done a very good job like keeping like different generations involved and at every game and in prominent spots. And like they've built a real culture, and it's so cool because you do have this direct connection with Jalen Brunson, and someone who was like, I always find this fact amazing, but he was literally like hiding in Patrick Ewing's locker as a kid. Like what other franchise could say that about what might eventually be 2 of the top 3 players in their franchise history? Like that's just a cool bit of shared DNA. But by keeping these guys around, like there is just an even greater incentive. And I think a recognition when it's like J.R. Smith and Marbury talking to these guys, like, hey, this has been brutal. Like, I think the stat was that they won 7 playoff games in 19 years to winning 11 in a row. But there is an inherent recognition in this group about what this fan base has gone through. And then to your point on the Knicks feeling like the series was over in game 1, like the Knicks literally experienced that punch in the mouth a year ago against the Pacers, right? Where it was like, where we were all kind of like, all right, here's how they could come back. But in our heart of hearts, we're like, all right, that's it. Like you're probably not coming back from that against a team as good as Indiana. And Mike Brown's showing them the footage before this game. And Mike Brown has found a way to cultivate like the Knicks have consistently been the more urgent team when other team seasons are on the brink. And they've won these games by like 50, 40, 30 now. Like it's like that is an amazing thing with this team.
You grew up a Knicks fan. Your co-host XJ grew up a Knicks fan. Both of your dads are Knicks fans. You guys talk about your dads on the podcast all the time, which I love. Like, what, if you don't mind sharing, like, what kind of conversations are you having now with your dad? You know, who's had to wait as long as he's had to wait.
Yeah, I don't want to underplay that. He's a slightly bigger football fan, but because of me and because of the pod, he's gotten back into basketball in I think a pretty big way, and watching it, and it's like it's a cool thing, and I'm sure you experience this on the Heat side. Like my fiance's sister and her husband like now watch every game with their son, and he's like growing up in Maryland and becoming like a Knicks fan, I'm like, oh, I can get him a jersey and stuff. And it's like, and all these like my other potential future brother-in-law, like watching every game and like texting me after, like it is this really cool thing where you just pull in these tertiary people in your life who might not even really be basketball fans generally. And they're just like, yeah, sure. Like I'll go along for the ride. And I know like people who just like went to Villanova and they're like, oh yeah, I just follow for those guys. And I love this team now because I love those guys. And it's cool to like if you were a great big college basketball fan, like I can't even imagine an equivalent, I guess LSU with the Bengals, maybe like
right.
in football, but
where you get like this cool, this post-college extension. Yeah.
And it's the same thing for them where like I put myself in their shoes so often, like, dude, I'd be pinching myself to be working with my best friends from college. Like what a privilege that is. And then you throw on top of, I mean, Jalen's making a lot less than he could be. You're making tens of millions of dollars and you're like, and you're winning and they're all a part of it. Like what are the odds of all those things coming together? Like it is this like collective family. And for my dad, like I know like we're both kind of used to like the feeling of and like in specific sports, like we had the Giants in the early 2000s, but like your teams like get to the precipice and then they break your heart. And that's obviously that's the nature of sports, right? That's what most sports fans go through and could very well still happen this year, given the quality of potential opponent out West. But it is this very cool thing to be like, oh, this isn't like, they're not going to break your heart because they don't show up. If they lose, it'll be because of injury or because they ran into an all-time great team.
We got plenty of time on this show, at least, to talk about like if the Knicks can actually win the championship. We got to figure out who they're going to be playing in the NBA Finals anyway. But I'm just going to say this: if they're shooting 52% in that series, they're going to be hard to beat. So we'll get into the breakdowns of all that eventually. But I took some flack on Locked On Heat. I think this was a couple of years ago because I had the gumption to say that the NBA is a better place when the Knicks are good. And that obviously doesn't sit well with Heat fans. No. Because of the Heat-Knicks rivalries in the 90s. And I remember those Heat-Knicks rivalries in the 90s, right? I was born in 1991. So it's like, you know, those were sort of my formative years. But I don't know. My dad's from Brooklyn. I've got cousins and family members who are Knicks fans. My dad's since become a Miami fan of all the sports. But maybe it's just me being a journalist too, like a trained journalist, where I'm just like, you know what? It's this team in New York. And I think when it's the Knicks and it's the Lakers. And I don't know that any of the other big markets really matter as much in today's NBA, where you can have a great Spurs team, a great Thunder team, and draw ratings, a great Pacers team and draw ratings. It's fine. But it's just different when it's the New York team and when it's the Los Angeles team. Those are the tentpole cities of the two coasts of this country. And it just feels like those markets matter so much. And there is a feeling here with the Knicks. It's like, hey, because it's New York City, because it's been as long as it's been, I don't know how you look at this and just say this isn't cool. Like from anybody in the league, any kind of fan base. And I know Heat fans will hate me for even saying it. I'll also remind Heat fans this was the best case scenario because you want Donovan Mitchell to get upset and demand a trade. Heat fans, that's the other part of this. But thank you very much. You mentioned the team building part of this though, and all the heartbreak that there was over the years. And what's so striking to me about this Knicks team is the way that it's built. It's almost as if they had not learned any lessons from the prior builds, right? The Knicks for years were a team that did not draft its own players, like would draft players, and then they notoriously had that long streak. You probably know it of like they didn't sign a draft pick to a rookie extension.
Like, almost 30 years. I believe RJ Barrett broke it, and then they traded him almost immediately.
Right? Yes, it's an insane streak. And yet, you know, you go through the list of some of the trades that they made, and you're just like, wow. Some of the signings that they made, you're just like, man, just chasing bad money after bad money. And there was you've watched this team. Like, this Knicks team has had some low lows. And there's moments, even this season, where it's just like, did they kind of do the same thing again? Where they just chased big-name players. They threw 4.5 first-round picks at Mikal Bridges and all this stuff. And you're just like, it looked good for a minute. Did they do it again? And I'm here to say they did not do it again. This was even though it kind of looks, if you zoom out, it kind of looks like the same version of those bad Knicks. When you really kind of get down into it, they didn't do it that way. But before I get to that, I have my top worst Knicks moves since 2000.
Yeah, go for it.
The Tim Hardaway signing in 2017. I'm starting from the bottom, and I'll end at the worst one.
Sure, yeah.
The Tim Hardaway Jr. signing in 2017
Mhm.
He becomes a good player with the Knicks. He goes away. They bring him back and overpay to bring him back. 4 years, $71 million. That could have been worse, but that was around that time where everybody was getting these big contracts for role players because we thought that the cap was going to go up higher than at a rate that it did. So it's still a bad move because they ended up having to put him in the Porzingis trade, but not great. Steve Francis in 2006.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Trading for him. You give up Trevor Ariza. Penny Hardaway's expiring. And the idea is to pair Steve Francis with Stephon Marbury.
Crazy idea.
Just everybody was like, that's bad. That's a bad idea. And they were like, we think it's a good idea. And it turns out it was
Can you give me what
idea.
is like, I mean, I was going to say, like, is there a modern NBA equivalent of that? And then I remembered that Dennis Schroeder and Russell Westbrook this summer was like, yeah. We're going to win this. Let's do it. We're going all in.
It's the opposite of the Steph Curry Monte Ellis trade, right?
Yeah,
It'd be as if the Warriors had Steph Curry and then brought in Monte Ellis.
To be fair, the Warriors were actively debating which one to trade. Like, I don't, you know more about that than I do.
You need a little bit of luck.
That might have been some incidental. Like in retrospect, they were like, we were always going to trade Monte. Obviously, we're going to trade Steph despite the ankle issues. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Jerome James signing in 2005.
Yeah. It's so funny because you say this stuff and I was literally 10 years old when that happened. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember reading about that. That didn't age well. Obviously, he had like 5 good playoff games. Like, we got to give him the most money. we can't
they give him they throw a ton of money at him. He comes into camp out of shape.
Yeah.
It's just, and it just never works.
Was it Sonic Spurs that he played really well in? They were like, Tim Duncan stopper, man. He's a beast. He's crazy. Yeah.
Allen Houston, bringing him back in 2001.
It's tough.
Would have been nice if that worked out, but just a 6-year, $100 million max deal, and his body just immediately breaks down. And we get the everybody thought they were going to use the amnesty on him. They ended up not, but yeah. Now we're getting into a little bit more modern stuff. The Andrea Bargnani trade.
Yeah, that's all timer.
A first round pick in 2016, and then 2 seconds.
First round became Jamal Murray. I want to say.
So eventually becomes Jakob Poeltl.
Yeah. Oh, that's not as bad. Yeah.
It's not as bad, but that it could have been Jamal Murray is the point, right? Like they end up doing other stuff with the trade. So it's less of like you look like I remember the Bargnani trade Bargnani trade happening in 2013 and being like, wow, that is such a bad deal.
Mm-hmm.
And now you look at it and you're like, well, it was only 1 first round pick. Was it really that bad? But just because it was the Knicks. Because of the time it was and because of how much hope that they put into this guy who had not shown a ton prior, it was still pretty bad.
It was terrible vibes, if I remember.
Like
from second one, it was awful vibes.
It was like, why are you doing that?
Oh, it's one of those things you watch and play once and you're like, yeah, this isn't gonna work out. Like there was no like Tracy McGrady came in, not that was a big trade, but he scored 26 points his first game. You're like, wow, we got Tracy McGrady, and that never happened. Like I don't think he scored over like 12 again. Right. But Bargnani, there was never a moment of like, that's why he was the number 1 pick. It was just all bad.
Antonio McDyess trading for him in 2002.
Yeah.
Gave up a bunch of stuff for him. Knee problems, body breaks down. That was really like from like early 2000s. That time was a lot of big names who had accomplished a lot, whose bodies were breaking down, throw a bunch of money at them. But it was McDyess, Jerome James, like all these guys.
Consistent team. Yeah.
Joakim Noah in 2016. This is the second worst one.
Yep.
4 years, $72 million guaranteed, and he is waived 2 years later, and just tons of dead money on the cap for years after that. And then the worst one, this is the all-timer, Mount Rushmore. You bring up this guy's name among Knicks fans, and the eyes immediately roll. You could probably guess it.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Eddy Curry, 2005.
Yeah.
Just an all-time. Just what are we doing here? You end up trading the pick that becomes LaMarcus Aldridge, and the pick that becomes Joakim Noah when he would have been good for you.
Sure. Yeah.
Just an all-time bad trade. And this wasn't even the scenario where this guy was good and then his body broke down. Like he was clearly already not keeping himself in shape, and then they went ahead and traded for him anyway. And it was just an all-time like. This guy was a top pick. We need a center. Totally outdated, backwards thinking type of deal. And when you look at what they ended up giving up and the players that they could have gotten, just set them back at an all-time level.
I mean, the heart issue is crazy. I mean, obviously stuff can happen, but just like you think of like the Mark Williams trade now and that getting reversed, like it was just what was what was the process? Like that I go back to so much that stuff, and it was like, was anyone thinking? Was anyone in the room being like, I don't know about this? And it just, but can we circle back on your point on how the Knicks were built? Because when Leon Rose came in and
all those are in the past. The Knicks are in the NBA Finals. Let's go back to positivity. Yes.
Yeah. Well, but I'll start almost somewhat negative because the Knicks' mistake always felt like, and this was a good lesson to me about, because you always were told like the smart NBA thing was, right, you don't build through the middle. And this is something you can relate to as a Heat guy, right? Because the Heat, similar to the Pacers, right? Nominally the Spurs, though obviously they ultimately ended up doing it, but like never tanking, right? Always being competitive. And we've seen over the years, like that is like, it's almost impossible to do that, right? Like very, very few teams like are able to build through the middle. And I guess maybe the Knicks were another example of this. Like you're usually meandering for like a decade plus until you luck into a Jalen Brunson type situation, and that springs you out of the mediocrity. And then you can build and build and build off of that. But you have to hit so many different moves on the margin. And obviously, like we'll talk about it if the Knicks play the Thunder, like what Sam Presti did was just overwhelm the rest of the league, right? Like he's the way Wemby is dominant as a player, Sam Presti has been dominant as a GM. Like the fact that they built this team this young and have twice as many picks as anyone else, like it is comical, like peak LeBron levels of dominance. And yet what Leon Rose did, like it could be argued is more difficult because you have to nail everything for that to work, right? If you are never going to tank, and the Knicks' nominal mistake for years and years and years was that they never intentionally tanked. They never hinkied it, right? They never processed it. They were never quite bad enough. The one year they had the worst record, they miss out on, which blessing in retrospect, but at the time, Zion and Ja, you were like, crap, like that's it. This was our one shot. And then Leon Rose comes in, he's like, no, we're not James Dolan doesn't want to suck. We're not going to suck. And it's like, all right, man, like we tried that. And it's a lot of like 35 and 47 is what that is. And mediocrity and garbage and like winning one fun game a year. And then it's like, all right, let's do this another 30, 40 years. And as a Knicks fan, you think you are just doomed to this like perpetual mediocrity was the perception. And then they are able to consistently nail picks in the late 20s, right? That's how you end up with OG Anunoby. Like Emmanuel Quickley it wasn't your third pick that was the centerpiece of that trade. It was Emmanuel Quickley. Like it wasn't Obi Toppin who was the gem. It was the fact that you got Deuce McBride, that you got Quentin Grimes, that a couple years earlier you got Mitchell Robinson, who's still on the team somehow. 9 years later in the second round, you luck into like Brunson's the Nepo baby a little bit, but also no one like most of the league was calling it a bad contract. He was willing to accept a 4-year, $55 million deal that would have just ended. Like, isn't this his fourth year on the Knicks? Like, it would have just ended this year. Like, how crazy would that scenario have been? If he was making $12 million a year doing this on the Mavericks, the last 4 years is crazy. The OG trade is brilliant. The Mikal trade seems like a massive overpay for 95% of the time. Right now, when he's true shooting is like 80% in the playoffs and he's playing all NBA level defense, no problem with it. And the Cat trade, and we've talked about this for 2 years on our podcast, it was all about how you use him. And they misused him for a year and a half. And it wasn't necessarily working out because of that. And they figured out an offense. He's playing far and away the best defense of his life. And it's all worked out. Josh Hart, first round pick, and Cam Reddish. Like these were all like incredible margin moves. And then Shamet is like the cherry on top of that. Like you sign him in August. Like it's crazy.
So to me, going back even a little bit further, there was 3 crossroad moments for the Knicks where, so they draft Kristaps Porzingis in 2016,
17. I think
2017.
You might be right. I'm not sure. Yeah.
And then in 2018, he tears his ACL, and he's never the same. And he ends up getting traded to Dallas. There's tension between him and the organization. A little bit after that, he gets traded to Dallas. Porzingis was the guy. He was, we all remember the unicorn stuff. He gets drafted there, and he's supposed to be the future of the franchise. I wrote about this recently at RealGM.com and how almost like in a full circle moment, they end up with Karl-Anthony Towns, who was taken number 1 that same draft, and he's now their unicorn. But there's a crossroad moment there where Porzingis looks like he's on this star ascendant rise, and he never quite gets there. He ends up winning a championship with Boston, very good player, but never quite hits that superstar level that we all thought was happening, like Wemby before Wemby almost, right?
Yeah, I mean, he was athletically, he was a freak before he got hurt. Like on top of the shooting, like he was such a good athlete and so good with the ball. Like yeah, he was on that trajectory.
There's no unicorn term without Kristaps Porzingis. He's the one that starts it. So that's the first crossroad moment. The second one is 2019, and you mentioned the Zion draft. They end up not moving up in the lottery to take Zion. They don't even end up with the second pick and get Ja Morant. They end up with everybody understood RJ Barrett, good player, not Ja, not Zion.
Yeah.
And then obviously they don't get Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving that same summer.
Yeah.
And so the big plan of 2019 where it's like, well, either we're going to get a good draft pick or we're going to get Durant and all these guys, none of it works. And they kind of have to go back to the drawing board, and then we end up with Jalen Brunson. And the reason why I think this Knicks build is different than prior ones is even if, like, hey, they still ended up, it's still not a homegrown team. Like you mentioned, nobody drafted other than Mitchell Robinson and Deuce McBride.
Yeah.
None of the starters were drafted to this team. They were all traded for or signed. But instead of doing it like super teams in the past, not just with the Knicks, but just in general, like the Nets did, they're like, hey, let's just sign our entire team. Let's sign Kyrie. Let's sign Kevin Durant. We'll go trade for James Harden in a little bit. We'll do all that. You saw a lot of super teams try to build themselves on the fly just in one summer, right? They tried to basically redo the Heat in 2010. Just like, let's just go sign all our guys and we'll figure it out. Instead of doing it that way, the Knicks 4 years ago signed Jalen Brunson. They earmarked that guy like, that's the guy. That's our target. Let's go get that guy. They went and got him. And there's definitely some luck involved because everybody thought Jalen Brunson was good. Nobody thought he was this. We've heard that a million times. Credit to Jalen Brunson, credit for the Knicks for going and getting their guy and taking a swing. And then instead of being like, okay, we got Brunson, now let's just do a bunch of other stuff. 4 years go by, and in those 4 years, they make the OJ Anunoby trade. And then they wait. And then they make the Cat and the Bridges deals. And then it's like they just slowly do it. And in 4 years, they work through the roster. They go through different playoff runs. They figure out what they needed. And then in this last one, it's basically the same team outside of, I mean, from this year to last year, what's the difference? Clarkson and...
Yeah, that's it. I mean, the core 8 guys are exactly the same. Yeah.
Yeah. Clarkson plays, occasional
Alvarado.
rotation minutes. Yeah. Alvarado's the other guy. The trade deadline was a nice pickup, obviously, but they just sort of slowly figure out what they need. Okay, we need an Alvarado because when Brunson's off and we have Cat on, we'd like to have more of a point of attack defender there and a guy who we trust with the ball in his hands who can play make a little bit defensively. Let's go get Clarkson, who was transformed into a role player for us.
Yeah.
All these things. And then they make the big move, which is Tibbs to Mike Brown, and Mike Brown is maybe the MVP of the playoffs right now.
Yeah.
On the eastern side of the bracket.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
And that's what strikes me as different is no, they didn't build it through the draft, but they did build through the middle, and they did build patiently, and they were methodical about this. It wasn't just go sign big names, go do the stuff. The Bridges trade is still a little like, okay, that was a lot, but it was, let's go get the things that we have a vision. Let's take our time, but let's execute the vision. And it's that patience that is really good. And one last nice thing to say about the Knicks, and one bad thing to say about everything else.
Yeah.
You hear this all the time. Teams that are built the right way.
Yeah.
And what that actually means is, well, people when people say that, what they're actually talking about is teams built through the draft.
Yeah.
But last I checked, we all hated tanking.
Yeah.
And yet the Spurs get the credit for building the right way, but they tanked for half a decade. The Thunder get credit for building the right way, and they tanked for a couple of years.
Yeah.
The Knicks did tank that 1 year, but kind of by accident.
Yeah.
They just sucked.
I mean, that was 20 years, man. That was just 20 years of like, I guess that was the plan, man. We wanted a high pick.
But the Knicks, people wouldn't think about this as a team that had traded for their players and signed their players. The Knicks, to me, are built more the right way than any team that they're going to end up playing in the NBA Finals. Because they just said, you know what? We're going to get good. We're going to go get guys we like. We're just going to be competitive. We're going to just be methodical about this. They did build this group through the middle. And I applaud that. And if the NBA is really trying to curb tanking, I don't want to hear anything else about, hey, teams that draft their players should get something against the second apron where they get a discount on the players that they get against the cap or whatever. No. Because if we're trying to award tank, that's just another way to award tanking. We don't want to do it. This was a team that didn't do it that way. They went out, they got competitive, they were methodical about it, they were precise about it, and I tip my hat to them. Good job, Knicks. You deserve to be here in the NBA Finals.
I never expected to hear all this from you, Wes, and it touches my heart. It's genuinely appreciated. I know Locked On Heat Wes can't say all this, so I'm happy.
That's why I have this show.
Real GM Radio Wes feels comfortable saying all this, but it's appreciated, and I agree with you. I think if I can return the comment, it's analogous to what Miami's done. It's analogous to what I think Indiana is like the chief example. Like this was the one year they tanked, right? Like they've had 20 straight years where we're always competitive, always in the mix. Even Oklahoma City, like, I don't know, there have been much more egregious examples and teams that have done it far worse, and they did it twice and they nailed their picks and they bounced back up. San Antonio, I think their fans should have had to suffer for a little longer, but give them credit. They got Wemby out of a total happenstance. So shout out to them. And the Knicks are built the right way. We'll see if it'll hold up to the teams that just drafted some freaks of nature over the last.
Enjoy the NBA Finals, Gavin. Thanks so much for jumping on. Everybody check him out at Locked On Knicks. Him and XJ, both of you guys have been on RealGM Radio during this playoff run. You guys do great work over there. Thanks for jumping on here.
Thanks so much, man.